Okay. I would like to call to order the August 7th, 2023 school board meeting at 6 o'clock PM. Ms. Marsan, would you please take roll?
Yes, we have Mrs. Bell joining us by Zoom. Mrs. Bell, can you hear us? Are you present?
Yes, I'm here.
Mr. Kuschert,
Here.
Mr. Lackner,
Here.
Mr. Lentz,
Here.
Mrs. McCabe,
Here.
Mr. McNally,
Here.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Here, please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving to citizen comments. We do not have any citizen comments at this time. So now reports to the board. We'll start with Dr. Gordon for a superintendent update.
Thank you, Mrs. Fairgrave. Tonight, I just want to update the board and the community on a number of activities that occurred over the summer. We had an incredibly busy summer, a really productive summer. Very appreciative of all of the work that occurred. I want to start by talking about our multiple ELA curriculum adoptions through K-8. We had over 92% of our teachers, including special ed, EL educators, LRC directors, reading specialists, ISC, speech therapists, complete this training. We had multiple opportunities for our educators to come together during the day, evening. Really an incredible experience. I was able to stop by a couple days. I know Ms. McCabe was able to stop by. Really was an outstanding opportunity for our educators to get a jump start into our new curricula in both the elementary and middle school. Really pleased again with our learning teaching team, the wraparound support that were offered to our educators. A lot of incredible thought and work went into that week, but again, it's around supporting our educators so they're ready to go when our students walk in those doors on Monday, August 14th, which is right around the corner. We had a number of professional learning community opportunities this summer where we brought in our leaders, continuing to build and deepen our knowledge of professional learning communities, the expectations around that. On July 31st, we brought together a little over 200 of our educators that consisted of our principals, assistant principals, coaches, ISCs, our PLC leaders, again, for building that distributive leadership throughout our organization. This is not about one person or the district office. This is about working throughout our entire organization to really ensure that our PLCs are launched in the way that we want them launched. We had our SEL committee, again, very collaborative opportunity where we identified and continued to build the support around our culture, our climate, and positive behaviors guidelines for all grade levels. We know our educators are continuing to seek different ways to support student behaviors. And this is one of our best ways of doing it, is collaborating with our educators and to do this together. Our L&T is partnering with our high schools to plan, develop, and implement professional learning for our new department chairs, which have all been hired. We're excited about their work and where we're going. Again, in a very collaborative together environment, making sure that our educators are set up for success when they come in this fall. We also hosted an administration retreat week focused on, you guessed it, our strategic plan, our PLCs, change management. We also focused on safety. We did a tabletop exercise with Detective Rentschler, who was outstanding, from the St. Charles Police Department, coming together to really run through it, just different scenarios, help our teams really think through decision-making processes. Really appreciate the partnership that we had with our local police department. Again, the collaboration with our Teachers Association. Jen Adam was in there. She's one of our committee members, really supporting that work. again, just huge kudos to our learning teaching team for hosting our really putting together our administrative retreat week. Operations team, they've been rocking and rolling all summer long, putting the finishing touches on our 10-year capital facility plan. Our North High School pool resurfacing project started and will continue through mid-August. Worked on a variety of mechanical projects, boiler replacements at Red Lane North, facilities of, just continuing to understand and evaluate our building needs, working with our principals to really have a deep understanding as our executive director of facilities, Amanda Stuber, continues to get her feet on the ground. A lot of partnership there. Our technology team investing in and understanding a new student information system that the board and the community will be hearing about in the coming weeks and months, and our staff installed new firewalls, replaced, updated tons of Chromebook and technology back into our classroom. Our tech teams literally pull all of this technology out, clean it, refurbish it, and get it ready back in for our students coming back in this fall. Human Resources Department, hiring. Hiring. I mean, we're putting new people on personnel reports the day of. I know that's not what we like, but we are hiring to make sure that we're fully staffed or as close to it for Monday when our students come in. Communications team, the strategic plan design and rollout. Got a hot off the presses, our first look at it. Incredibly pleased, most importantly, with the work and the thinking inside it. But I absolutely love the design and layout that Scott and his team put together for us. Share that with the board. There'll be others. We'll send the final proof off for printing tomorrow or the next day. We'll have some of those. We'll also, more importantly, we'll have a digital presence on that in the coming week. And again, they worked also on the annual report and got that out to our community members. So just a quick snapshot of the work. I think people don't realize how much work actually happens in the summertime throughout our district. And that is with our teaching staff, that's with our administrators, that's with our classified staff members, everybody coming together to really set ourselves up for a successful launch of the school year. Our staff return this Thursday, August 10th. Excited to welcome them back. This is second year in a row where we're bringing our entire staff together over at East High School for a quick welcome back and really launching the school year. And then, as I said earlier, our students are back at school on Monday. And I did say Monday. It is not Wednesday. It is Monday, August 14th. I know that's a big change in our district, but it will be Monday, August 14th. Whew. With that, I hand it back to you.
Great. That was a great update. Next, we'll move on to board member reports on committee meetings. Shall we start with Learning and Teaching Committee?
We have nothing to report because we haven't met since we met just before the last board meeting. So our next meeting is August 21st. We had a prep meeting this afternoon that both Mr. Kuchert and I think went really well. So board members will be pleased with the discussion we're going to have in August.
Excellent. Thank you. Business Services.
Absolutely. Business Services met on July 31st. There were a number of items on our agenda. We looked at the draft budget. D303 gets about 90% local revenue. We receive very little state funding. And currently the budget next year, our levy is pegged at about 5% increase. We also looked at the long range, or a draft of the long range capital improvement plan that has about $213 million worth of improvements. The team is going to be taking that back and kind of whittling it down a bit. These are improvements over the next 10 years. A couple pieces to point out from that. Our current budget is about $2 to $3 million for capital improvements. Other districts of our size typically have an annual budget about $8 to $10 million for capital improvements. I think it's a testament to our staff that we've been running so effectively and kind of keeping the lights on for what we've been keeping the lights on at. We also I believe those are, I think they're part of the consent agenda, but we did a quick review of the hazardous walking bus routes for Mr. Lackner here for this year's school year for approval. Looked at the ATI athletic contract amendment. ATI has raised their fees because of salaries and some other stuff that is coming to the board tonight as well. The intergovernmental agreement for our school resource officers is in there. That's coming to the board tonight, as well as we have an action item or a 4 action item on the purchase for operations for some F-350 trucks. So we do have a large fleet of vehicles that the district manages. Some of the discussion around that was also potentially, so number one, giving them approval to do some purchasing through the state agreement or the essentially co-op buying. But also we wanted to potentially talk a little bit tonight about what it would look like for us to go out for bid for that and potentially do it separately. Last year, there were some challenges because of when the approvals happened, the team was not able to actually purchase it because of, the sheer volume of purchases. We also looked at the quote from College Board for PSATs and some other important tests that we do for our students. And then the contract for our enrollment and boundaries stuff. I believe I got everything in there. So
I think you did. I'd just like to encourage anyone who has an interest in how the budgeting process works to look at that 731 meeting. There was a very good discussion about the revenue sources within the district's budget, how those revenue sources are sourced, both from local property tax and corporate tax locally, as well as the way the state allocates funding to districts, which includes a very small allocation relative to our total budget size here in D303. It also, Mr. Attaway and team did a good job of discussing grants and federal programs for which dollars might be available and what parts of our budget are driven by those federal dollars. So there is a really good discussion in that 731 meeting, and I'd encourage folks to take a look at it.
Okay, thank you both for that update. And the final would be related to our policy committee.
I'll take that one.
There? Okay.
Yeah, this is a much more brief update. We did policy met on 7/31 as well at 4:30. It was primarily a 5-year review press packet, I believe 111 and 112. That's actually on the consent agenda for this evening. There weren't a ton of noteworthy changes other than I suppose the employment history review, which was added to a couple of those policies. As Mr. Lackner said, we would encourage you to go back if you had any questions to that meeting. It was a brief one. The rest was mainly a 5-year review. So any legal changes or any major impact to the language, but it was a pretty brief meeting. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll move to item 4 on the agenda, which is the consent agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items for A through 4V?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Mr. McNally and Mr. Kuchert for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Kuchert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Peregrine.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving to item 5 on the agenda, or section 5, is for action. Item A, superintendent's contract amendment. Can I have a motion to approve the superintendent's contract amendment for the 2023 through 2024 school year?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. McNally. Any discussion at this time?
On this one, I'd just like to say thank you to Paul and the team so far for the work that's already been done. There's still quite a bit to do. And I think, from a feedback perspective, we want to continue to keep the communication with the community as well as the board to be the top level that it's been. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that.
Yes, just to echo, thank you very much on behalf of the board for your last year of service and performance.
Thank you so much. Proud to be here.
Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 5B is a memorandum of understanding for the SCEA Joint Mentoring Committee. Can I have a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with the SCEA regarding a joint mentoring committee?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. McKay, Mr. McNally for the second. Is there any discussion at this time?
Yeah, just a couple questions. What does the joint mentoring committee do for us?
So they come together to really think through how the mentoring process will work. So it literally is a collaborative effort to design the mentoring for us going forward.
And is there an existing mentoring guide in place today?
There is, but it needs some work done to it. Hence the committee really rethinking about how we do this better to support our newest members of our educational team.
Got it. And then it's being pushed about 3 months. Is there concern about this mentoring committee happening? Have the members of the committee been chosen? Or are we expecting that to happen soon? Because school starts soon.
Yeah, that will happen soon. But it really was trying to make sure that we bring the right people to the table to do this work as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions or discussion at this time? This is just one final comment. This is really an outgrowth of the prior contract that we approved within the last 45 days or so, 45 to 60 days. So with that, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 5C is the purchase of operations F-350 trucks. Can I have a motion to approve the purchase of 3 F-350 trucks?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz, for the second. Any discussion? I believe there is at this time.
So this is one that we made an ask to the team because we do have a pretty decent fleet of vehicles. And we're having one or two essentially sunset or become past their usable life every year. And so the ask is for the team to bring that to the board and then potentially for us to, talk about going out to RFP or some other thing for this, potentially get other pricing, just to give us additional options in addition to the state purchasing process. So I don't know if anybody else had anything to add to that.
Nothing to add. I just do have a question. What do we do with those vehicles that have gone past the use? Do those get traded in or they go to auction?
Yeah, so generally traded in or to auction if they're way beyond their life, which they are.
So just to follow up on Mr. Lentz's question and comment. Have you had the opportunity or has the team? Yeah.
Pull up probably a better expert than myself on this. So I'm swimming in the deep water.
So strangely enough, after the business services meeting, the state contract opened. So
Okay.
we are within the purchasing period right now. If we were to go out to bid on our own, I would be concerned that we would miss the window for the state contract where we would be forced into accepting whatever bid prices that we got. In a previous life, I did do this where we bid it out separately and compared it to the state contract. And it was maybe $1,000 difference. It was not significant dollars per vehicle when we went out to bid on our own. And honestly, we only got one price back that was below the state contract price. So every other price that we received from dealers was above the state contract price. So it is definitely something that we can do. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for this time just because we're within the purchasing window, but it's something we can explore if we're doing a large purchase. If we were to buy 10 trucks at one time, that might be something we would want to explore.
Yeah, I don't think we're thinking of it for this time. I think that's what we kind of came to in the last discussion. So, but certainly for a potential future one.
Does it look like we'll be replacing about 2 or 3 per year, given the current state of our fleet?
I think that we are going to be looking at least 2 or 3 per year. It may be more in the beginning because I think we have some catch up that we need to play on some of our vehicles. But eventually we would like to get into a rotation where it's 2 or 3 per year and it's a 10-year replacement cycle.
Would there be any through the agreement, would there be any perk to purchasing what we need right now? If I know we're asking for approval for 3, but if 4 or 5 or 6 of these vehicles are really useless at this point, is there any perk associated with purchasing more vehicles through this program?
I would venture to guess that pricing is lower now than it will be a couple of years from now. So I'm sure we will get better pricing if we were to buy more now. It's just we need to operate within the budget constraints. So if the board would like to allocate additional dollars and fund 20 to purchase more vehicles, that's definitely something we can do.
But there wouldn't be a volume discount available.
There would not.
Okay.
And that was really, I think, the advantage if we purchase volume now. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Attaway. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
and Mrs. Speargrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving to item 5D, student international travel for the North High School Jazz Workshop to Germany, Austria, and France. Can I have a motion to approve student international travel for the North High School Jazz Workshop to Germany, Austria, and France?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kuschert and Ms. McCabe for the second. Is there any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Yes, Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
and Mrs. Speargrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 5E, student international travel for East High School educational tour of Costa Rica. Can I have a motion to approve student international travel for the East High School educational tour of Costa Rica?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lentz has the second. Any discussion at this time? Okay, Ms. Marsan, please take the roll call vote.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
and Mrs. Speargrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Item 5F, student international travel for D303 high school choirs tour to Ireland. Can I have a motion to approve student international travel for District 303 high school choir students to tour Ireland?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. McCabe and Mr. McNally for the second. Is there any discussion at this time?
Yes.
Any? Oh, okay.
I just felt it was true.
Yes, very true. Ms. Marsan, would you please take the roll call vote?
Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
Mrs. Bell,
Yes.
and Mrs. Speargrave.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Moving to section 6, for your information on the agenda, there are our standing for informational items in the packet. So our D303 financial report, Mid-Valley financial report, Freedom of Information Act requests, and district enrollment at this time. Item 7, new business. Do any board members have new business at this time?
I don't have new business, but I just wanted, I should have probably done this at a different point. I went to see the Student One Act plays at East this last week and just wanted to let the board know that it was great fun. These are plays that are written and directed by students and performed by students. And before schools even started, they were really did a great job. Kudos to the students and to the teachers. It was fun to see.
Great, thank you for that recognition. Anything else? Okay, do we have any citizen comments at this time? Okay, we do not have any citizen comments. So with that, our board meeting will adjourn at 6:26 PM on Monday, August 7th. After we get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Lentz. I was a little jumping the gun there. Thank you, Mr. McNally. And 6:26 PM. Yes, take a vote. Go ahead.
Okay, Mrs. Bell? Mrs. Bell? Okay, we may have lost her. Mr. Kuschert,
Yes.
Mr. Lackner,
Yes.
Mr. Lentz,
Yes.
Mrs. McCabe,
Yes.
Mr. McNally,
Yes.
and Mrs. Fairgrave.
Yes, motion passes and we now are